It really is as bad as people are making it out to be. This is not an exaggeration. So, all right, so we have some stuff to talk about today that's going to either shake up the community or make the community very happy, depending on who you are. But generally speaking, I think most people are a little concerned about Dehya's release. And so today I want to talk about my first impressions with the character. Now, this is being recorded before my guide was actually done. However, both of these videos should be releasing around the same time. So if you do end up getting Dehya and you want to learn how to build her, that's going to be in the guide video. But for now, we're just going to talk about my experience playing Dehya and if it holds up and compares to what people have been sort of saying about her power level. Now, first things first, look at her design in playable form, actual peak design. This character looks so freaking good. The entire aesthetic is amazing. Also, there's this one voice line. You go over here and you take a light hit.
Your mommy teach you that?
So anyways, it's one of my favorite characters designs in the game, and I was really hoping to kind of main her and then also join me on the second half of whatever Abyss Flora might be doing. So let's talk about what's good about her and what you can use her for. First off, though, I'm going to show you exactly how she works. Basically, Dehya's elemental skill does a couple things. Think of it like Pyro Albedo field. So it creates this fire field here, and when you hit an enemy, up to once every 2.5 seconds, it can proc fire, basically, do pyro damage, and the damage isn't really that high unless you just giga buff it. It does partially scale off of her attack and her HP, and so you're getting hybrid scaling. And something else you can do is you can replant her elemental skill. Let's say enemies move away or something. You can just do this over here, and that'll put it down again. The second cast will deal more damage than the first cast, as you can see right over here. Ranging Flame is the second hit, and it will also proc her Ascension passive, which is basically within 6 seconds after retrieving the Fiery Sanctum field, you're going to take 60% less damage when receiving the damage effect from Redmane's Blood. So what is Redmane's Blood? Redmane's Blood is basically whenever a character in your party takes damage while you're inside of this field, Dehya is taking 50% of that damage, assume 50% at talent 10. Let me be clear, it's not always 50%. Right now it's at 46 because I'm talent 8. 50% at talent 10 of their damage and slowly dealing it to Dehya over time. So let me put another character in the party and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so in this field, let me get the higher level one. I'm gonna hit Beto. Beto's barely taking any damage at all from this thing. Granted, this is an overworld ruin guard, but the damage being dealt is not that high. Also, he won't attack me again for some reason. That is so rude. Waiting for Dehya's field to go away to attack again. I can't believe this. She gets attacked. Her health barely goes down. She's barely taking any damage, and she has really high stagger resistance. That's the other thing that Dehya's field applies. And then, as you can see, Dehya's taking damage over time. Slow, low damage over time. It's slowly depleting her health, and then once you've caught up with the damage dealt, then it's gone. So there's a couple problems with this. First off, it's a cool concept, right? A character that can take damage for other characters while off field, and then like when on field also just continues to take damage over time. It's whatever. It's a cool concept, right? Because the idea of mitigating the damage and sending it to someone else is new. We don't have anything like that. But the problem is that it doesn't really do enough. So Dehya does have a passive that will heal her when her HP gets pretty low, and it'll recover 20% of her max HP and restore 6% of her max HP over 2 seconds for the next 10 seconds. So basically, this is just another 30% of max HP, totaling up to 50% of Dehya's HP. That's great for Dehya. But the problem is, if you have another character on field and they're slowly taking damage over time and you don't run a healer, then they're going to eventually die. If you take enough damage, if they don't have high enough HP, they will eventually run out of health and just die. At the moment in the game, unless you're running a team full of characters that just have really high HP, it will probably happen. So effectively, what this means is that it's always better to run a healer or shielder at the moment than it is to run Dehya, because at least shielders can mitigate 100% of damage if you build them right, and healers can just regenerate the damage you take, so it doesn't matter. So effectively, her elemental skill doesn't bring any new value to the table. On top of that, the only enemies that hit really hard in this game now are the consecrated beasts, which, you know, it's cool to have a character that can kind of deal with that, but again, if you have shields, if you have heals, this just doesn't really matter that much. Now, that said, they could add some kind of content that limits you bringing shielders or healers, or just really necessitates Dehya, but I do think it would be kind of weird to put Dehya in that position where she is the only character that's able to deal with that content, especially considering she's going to be standard 5-star and actually less accessible to the people that would need to pull her in that instant to deal with that content. So while she does provide stagger resistance, and while she can take some of the load off of your team, it's not really enough to justify pulling the character for that utility at the moment, and therefore I honestly think the utility compared to just bringing a shield or a healer is it's arguably useless. Are you getting value out of it? Sure, but the fact that it's easily replaceable by any character in the game that can heal or shield kind of just feels really bad, especially for a 5-star character. Now, ways they could fix this, maybe they make an artifact set that makes it so when you take damage, it like heals your teammates by a portion of that damage, and the healing percent could be extremely low. That's just one thing I could think of, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, that's basically our elemental skill. The pyro application on it, by the way, because it's every 2.5 seconds at max, is not the best. It's just really slow, and it's not great for melt unless you're playing it with burning. But next up is her elemental burst. And like, surely this is good, right? Because she throws some punches. She feels really, really cool. It's scaling off of her attack and HP. So like, surely she does a lot of damage. And like, surely you can just combo her with someone like Xingqiu or Beidou to try and get lots of damage out, right? Well, let me kind of show you what we're dealing with here. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw Dehya in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put her on a team with Xingqiu, Yelan, and Beidou. And then I'll just throw in a random for the second half because we're probably not gonna need to keep going. So let's just do that. Let's just activate all their bursts all at once. Use our elemental skill. Okay, and then we start punching. Oh, that's kind of weird. Where's Xingqiu, Yelan, and Beidou? Where are all their attacks? I know they're working. I know the characters aren't broken. That was like super weird. Well, it's actually not that weird. It's coded into the game to work this way. She does not work with Xingqiu, Yelan, and Beidou. Reason being that her elemental burst is burst damage and burst attacks. It doesn't count as a normal attack animation, a charge attack animation. It doesn't count as normal attack damage, charge attack damage. It just counts as burst and burst, which like I guess makes sense if you just think about the animations of it, but it is a little disappointing that you can't pair her with these characters because what I'm about to show you is her unbuffed damage. Well, you actually just saw her unbuffed damage right there, but let me show you her with a mono pyro team, and I'll go unbuffed and then I'll show you buff damage, just so that way you can get an idea of exactly how much we're looking at. So let me show you her unbuffed damage first. No buffs. Here's how much we're looking at. This is C0R1. That was C0R1, talent level 8 Dehya, unbuffed. Okay, granted, I didn't crit for a lot of it, and I have like 70 crit rate or something. I don't remember how much I have, but that's unbuffed, right? But like, okay, you know, most characters need buffs in this game, but most characters do. So like, surely if you just add buffs to Dehya, she ends up being a lot better of a character, right? Surely that's all you have to do. Well, let's show you that. So basically, Dehya's elemental skill can snapshot, by the way, so we're gonna do this in Bennett's burst. Her burst does not snapshot. I'm gonna go over to Kazuha. And now we're gonna switch to Dehya. And like, okay, like the damage is okay. I'm out of Bennett's burst, and that's kind of my fault on the timing. But basically, Dehya was doing like 24k damage when she was in the burst. That's not too bad. But considering how many hits you actually do and how much investment it takes, the fact that it takes a Kazuha, a Bennett, it takes that resistant shred, it takes that pyro damage bonus, and it takes her best in slot set to do that much damage is honestly kind of pathetic. It's honestly kind of bad. Hey, this is post-editing Brax here. I don't feel like I went into enough detail about Dehya's elemental burst and exactly how it feels to actually use. Because the damage is low, it already kind of feels like you're slapping someone with a pillow or like a wet napkin or something. But I think my biggest problem with it is actually just how it feels to control. Because since it's essentially automatic where you can just hit the gas a little bit by hitting your elemental skill or your normal attacks to speed it up slightly, it feels really hard to control. Sometimes you can literally just miss enemies if they walk backwards or if you knock them out of range or something like that. And since you're basically only getting up to 10 hits in any burst at C0, it kind of just feels bad to use. Now, this could just be like a Yai Miko situation where people will just get over it, but that's something that I found to be a bit of a pain when I was playing Dehya initially. To put in perspective how much damage this is pretty close to Mono Pyro's Xinyan's damage, and for a character that is a 5-star limited character, going into standard eventually, but starting as 5-star limited, to be dealing less damage than a character that is a 4-star that was previously one of the worst characters in the entire game, that's pretty damn bad. And like with Mono Pyro, like there's no doubt in my mind that with that team we just played with Xiangling, Kazuha, and Bennett, you can probably clear the content, right? Because Xiangling is able to carry so much of that damage. Honestly, I don't even think my Xiangling had like artifacts on and stuff. Yeah, she didn't have a set bonus or the right pieces on. So like in that instance, like Xiangling wasn't doing a lot of damage. But with Dehya, with her optimal artifact set and all of that sorts of stuff, she was only able to pump out 25k per hit with Bennett buff with Kazuma buff, and you're unable to vape with her unless you bring someone like Mona. I have found that you can use Mona with her, which is cool because it's a new use for this character that we didn't previously have, because her burst is so short that you can get almost full uptime of Mona's burst as well in the damage bonus, and you can vape multiple times. But even with that, her damage is so freaking low, and I don't know what they were thinking with this, you know, because I feel like she should be dealing a lot of damage with her burst, especially a burst that's going to cost 70 energy when she doesn't even generate that many particles herself. Characters that don't generate instant pyro particles like this, or that generate them over time in their elemental skill, kind of feel bad when you use a 70 cost burst that lasts a short amount of time. It just gets like no damage. It just makes me really sad because she had so much potential and they really just did not want her to be good. Now, if you get her constellations, that sort of changes things. Your constellations provide really good value, but they only really provide super good value because she herself was not good value to begin with. So like anything above whatever she does now feels a lot better than it is. And when you get her to C6, someone mathed it out to be around C0 Hu Tao or C1 R1 Hu Tao or something close to that at C6. So she becomes comparable to that when you get all of her constellations. But it's important to remember that this is a 5-star character. And her design is amazing, so you'd expect that she'd be a 5-star, but it's just so crazy to me that they would do this to a character and make her actually feel like the first unplayable unit. Like, I'm gonna be real, this isn't the same thing as someone saying that Kokumi can't crit, so her damage is bad. This isn't the same deal. This is like, they've actually created a character that cannot clear Spiral Abyss unless they get carried by other characters, and restricted the roster to which they can actually be carried with. You can't play with Xingqiu Yulan unless you just play C6 Bennett and never burst, but like that also just feels really bad to do anyways. So in general, it's just kind of disappointing because I really wanted to main this character, and as someone that was really looking forward to her since her announcement, it just feels kind of bad. Now, like, one potential positive is that since she's moving to the standard banner, it's possible that a lot of players that enjoy Dehya will end up getting her constellations over time, and even her first constellation is like a decent damage jump. And so as a player that may lose a lot of 50-50s, like, this is good news for you if you enjoy Dehya. But it's also a little sad because I wish they didn't feel that they had to make her so bad for her to be a standard character, because in my opinion, she's actually the worst standard character option unless you have constellations. I genuinely believe Chi-Chi brings more value to a team than her, because at least with Chi-Chi you can superconduct for physical, and at least Chi-Chi is really good at her job, which is healing a ton of HP, like a ridiculous amount of HP. In Dehya's case, if they made her mitigation something like 80% at talent 10, I understand that's a lot, but then she might be, you know, debatably less bad in comparison to shielders, because if it was 80% and she heals herself, then at least your character's taking significantly less damage rather than having to go all the way to talent 10 just to mitigate 50%. So I actually have more to talk about though. So some of you guys might be thinking, okay, well, Brax, she's meant to be a Burgeon character. That's what she's meant to do. She's meant to trigger Burgeons and be played with like Xingqiu Nahida or something, just have Nahida drive, and then she's an off-field character, and then you just ignore her burst. That's what they intended. First off, we know that's not true, because then they wouldn't have made her burst completely contradict that. But second off, her in Burgeon is actually pretty bad too. She gets trigger once every 2.5 seconds, which is slower than Toma. Like, Toma is able to at least put out a firewall once every, you know, roughly 1 second or so. You can get Pyro Infusion on D-Luke with his burst, and between that and his elemental skills, even Retro Burgeon feels a little bit better because his personal damage is better. The only character she's really better for Burgeon then is like maybe Amber. Because you have to consider that her elemental skill doesn't even have 100% uptime. Something I forgot to mention earlier in the video is that her elemental skill has a 20-second cooldown, and when you put her skill down again, it actually maintains the same duration that it had before it went away. So it doesn't actually refresh, it just maintains the same amount, which, like, I don't really understand why they didn't just make it refresh. Or even with her burst, when you use her burst, it picks up the field and takes it off for a moment, and then it places it back down at the end. Why would they do that and not have it refresh the duration of her elemental skill? Getting 100% uptime on her is a pain in the ass, because technically to do it, well, actually technically there's no way to have it unless you have like sacrificial and it procs on like the second hit or something, because even then when you use her burst, it goes down. So you don't have 100% uptime on the pyro, or even close to 100% uptime. It only triggers once every 2.5 seconds. In that time, you might even be able to get past the 5 bloom limit. Now, there is one team, like I mentioned kind of earlier, that she's actually good in. This is Melt Ganyu. You still have to play a healer, which feels bad, but she can can be good for Melt Ganyu. She doesn't protect against everything that staggers you. You can still get punched by a Ruin Guard and fall over with Ganyu. It's still very possible, and I've had it happen. But with burning with Nahida and Dehya and Bennett, Melt Ganyu can be okay. It's a fine option, but I just feel like that's like way too niche to really even be able to justify it. This Melt team's pretty fun. I'll talk about teams in my guide video, but basically the verdict on this character is she's just not very good. And it really pains me to say that because I want her to be good so bad, but they did not do good things to her. Just for reference, for what I've been doing for this video, I am doing energy recharge, pyro damage, crit damage. She has massive energy problems. I can give her attack percent sands and run her with someone like Raiden, and then that is less of an issue. But just to be clear, in mono pyro, if you play her with Bennett, Kazuha, and Xiangling, Fav on Kazuha, and you funnel particles, it's 180% energy recharge, minimum requirement to burst every rotation. So you're basically married to ER sands. People are like, oh, do I need attack percent or do I need HP scaling? Neither. You're gonna use energy recharge because you don't have any choice because you want to use her burst. And if you don't want to use her burst, then fine. You can use attack percent sands, which is going to be more damage than HP sands, or you can just give her HP and let her tank off field. Either one of those is totally fine. But what I'm saying here is this is gonna be one of her best options, and I'll show you guys in the official guide. If you want to see the calculations, I have a link to it there. So here I am at floor 12-2. Now this is the one that's been giving a lot of people trouble because the enemies in it, after these ones, the next wave of enemies gives a lot of people trouble with just staying alive because they do so much damage, right? So like maybe Dehya is like meant to solve that problem with all the enemies that like will just absolutely demolish you. So yeah, so maybe Dehya will be good for that, right? So surely that's worth bringing Dehya. Also, this guy's just out of my Bennett field, which kind of sucks. Here we go. I want to snapshot the replacement here. So I'm going to place it again. And it is reducing the damage I'm taking by a fair bit, actually. Except I'm still getting pushed around and knocked back, even while in her field, which is supposed to prevent you from getting staggered. So it already doesn't work like as intended. I just feel so bad. And then she died because I didn't ever feel that. If you think that Dehya's gonna save you from these guys, she's clearly not. Could I have not used Dehya's burst and waited another 7 seconds for her field to come back up again afterwards so that way I could have taken less damage? Sure. But the point is that it's not stopping a significant portion of damage, so it's not going to fix any of the problems. And the damage output from the team, that's like one of Dehya's top teams, by the way. One of her best, because it has Xiangling, Kazuha, Bennett in it. And it's still not going to be enough. And if you want to see more clips of Abyss and different teams for Dehya, check out my guide, because I tried so many different teams, and a lot of those clips went better than this clip did. And still, you're going to notice these inconsistencies where I take high damage or I get knocked back even in Dehya's field, where it's supposed to give you a bunch of stagger resistance. So it just feels so bad, dude. It feels so bad. Why'd they do this to our girl? Anyways, she's not 100% duped. There is a way they can fix this character, but they're probably not going to do it. If they want, I mean, first off, there's 2 ways they could do this. The first off, they could just buff the character. I don't understand why they're so against buffing characters, like overtly against it, like it's the worst possible idea that could ever exist. I understand being skeptical about nerfing characters. That makes sense to me because people spend money on them, but making a character stronger that people spend money on, I do not understand the problem with that. But the other way they could do it is releasing an artifact set that is hyper specific to her kit. The way I see them doing that is something like whenever you take damage, increase elemental burst damage by a certain amount of damage. It has to be specifically burst damage. It can't be attack, it can't be damage bonus in general. That would like potentially power creep Xiao or someone that loses HP like as they, ult. So it would have to be something that would be specifically burst damage, and it would have to be something that happens when you like take damage, and maybe that could make her stronger. But I will say, for this to be good and for this to fix her power level, not just make her, twice as strong as she normally is, which is half as strong as Hu Tao, or that's probably not exactly accurate, but you know what I mean. It would have to actually be strong enough to actually bring her ceiling way higher. And what worries me about that is that if they did something like that, that would likely be fuel for burning teams to hit really high numbers as well, which would power creep certain characters anyways, and I feel like they're not going to do it, but they could release an artifact set. I do want to hold out hope because this is a character that I really do care about, and I probably will try to play them as much as possible anyways. Listen, if you just play overworld stuff, I mean, if you just play overworld, you probably haven't gotten this far in the video anyways, but if you don't care about Abyss, she's fine. She's good enough. If you care about Abyss, this is probably the worst decision you could make for your account in terms of pull value, and I just really want to be clear about that. She's currently in an unplayable state, and I don't think think that anyone should ever pull on a character because they might be good later. I feel like that's what reruns are for. And now granted, she's not gonna have a rerun because they're moving her to standard banner, but I still stand by that. I don't think it's worth pulling a character now because she might be good later. I think you should pull for her if you want her character, if you like Dehya and you just want to play her, whatever, that's fine. But, you know, just be aware that this is probably the lowest value unit in the entire game right now. I would say even the worst 4 stars have more value than Dehya at the moment, and that feels really bad. So first 3-star character, woo! Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, or if you want to be kept up to date with other Genshin stuff or Honkai Star Rail or anything, subscribe down below. Hit that button. Let me know what you think of Dehya down in the comments below. It is as bad as everyone says it is. I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.